Embassy Site Services relies upon a strong internal transport team to deliver their projects to the highest standard. Today, I was invited to speak to Liam, Embassy's transport manager. We discussed the importance of a smooth-running operation, the future of the transport industry, his relationships with the drivers, and how the whole fleet of vehicles is maintained on a weekly basis. So I'm here today with Liam, our transport manager at Embassy Site Services. Liam, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
How you doing? You good?
I'm very well, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I'm all right. Liam, tell us a little bit about what it means to be a transport manager.
So you have to have a CPC qualification, which is a proper course to go to. And every O licence, if you're standard national or international, you have to have a CPC operator working for you. If you're restricted like we are, you don't have to have a CPC operator. But because Embassy is a progressive company, they've hired me to come in and make sure everything's safe and legal.
What does that mean then if you're restricted, Liam? Tell us a bit more about that.
A restricted O licence, you can only carry your own goods.
Right.
So you like if your haulage companies, your Eddie Stobarts and things like that, they carry goods for other people. So if they're working just in the UK, they're national O licence. If they're working abroad as well, they'll have a standard international O licence. Restricted operators, which most scaffold companies will be, only carry their own goods.
Right, okay. So talk to us about your journey for getting to where you are now as a transport manager. You mentioned to me earlier on you started off as a driver, is that right?
Yeah, I left the army in 2004, started working as a lorry driver, done that for about 9 years, and I decided that I wanted to be more, do more. So I put myself through a couple of qualifications, one of them being transport manager. And in 2013 I started running my own little transport department.
And how long have you been working for Embassy?
Oh, just over 2 years now.
And what's the difference between working for Embassy and other companies you've maybe been with?
The main difference is we're not a transport company, so we don't earn money from transport. So we're a construction company, we get paid for building and taking down things. With a transport company, you get paid for the miles you do and deliveries you do.
Okay. Now, you mentioned to me earlier on that part of your job is about sort of safety of the drivers and what have you and things and going through sheets and data. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So yeah, every driver who operates our vehicles is governed by EU TACO rules. So they can only drive a certain amount of time before they have to have a break. They've got to drive a certain amount of time per day, per week, per fortnight. So one of my duties is to make sure that everyone's adhering to that legislation.
And talk us through a typical day, what it might look like for yourself. You know, you must be in pretty early, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's an early start. I'm in for 5:30, making sure that the list of vehicles to go to certain jobs is the correct list of vehicles, making sure that it's the right vehicle for the load type, make sure the guys are getting in the right vehicles, make sure they've got all the equipment they need before they even start. So we do about 4 or 5 checks even before we hand over the keys. And then once the guys got the keys, it's their job to secure their load. But before they leave the yard, every vehicle's weighed to make sure it's within limits and every load is checked for security.
And you mentioned earlier on that Embassy is a progressive company, and I mean, transport itself is changing hugely over in recent times. So can you talk to us a little bit about sustainability and about how Embassy is helping to become a greener company and things like that?
Yep, so we do progressive training within SAFED, so safe and fuel efficient driving, make sure all the guys are trying to use the smallest carbon footprint they can when they're driving. We're also looking into dual fuel vehicles. A lot of our company cars now are either electric or hybrid, and we're waiting for alternative fuel vehicles to become really good standard with HGVs. At the moment, electric HGVs aren't good enough for our job, and hydrogen's not practical. But as soon as that happens, that's something we're looking into.
See, that's interesting. And what would you like to see happen within the industry that helped those sorts of things? What changes would you like to see happen?
It's just got the price has got to come down, especially for hydrogen. The problem with hydrogen is the extraction and the storage costs for hydrogen are just extortionate. It's a very early. If you think combustion engines have been around for so long, so petrol and diesel have been around for decades, nearly a century, and we're only just starting in the first decade of hydrogen-powered vehicles. So we need to get the cost down for extraction and the cost down for transportation and storage, and then we can start developing more hydrogen-powered larger vehicles within the country, because it's going to take over electric.
Yeah, and you know, as you say, it's going to be a huge part of the future. And scaffolding itself, we know that scaffolding itself per se hasn't necessarily changed drastically, should we say, over the years, but this is part of the element of it that might well do so.
Yeah, so scaffolding hasn't changed per se, but the legislation and the rules and the safety guidance around scaffolding is always changing. I mean, it's like every industry, it's reactive. As soon as one incident happens, HSE send out bulletins to everyone and it changes the code of practice on what you've got to do.
And so that must make your job difficult, staying on top of that legislation and making sure that you are very aware of all the rules and things that you need to follow?
Yeah, I mean, within transport we do get a lot of notice. We've got the DVS2, so Vision Standard 2 coming out next year. So we're already on top of that, starting to upgrade our vehicles to meet that standard.
And how would you say that Embassy are good at making sure that your training is up to date, not just for yourself, but for your team as well?
Yeah, I mean, Embassy really do invest in training. We've got our own academy here for the construction guys, and yeah, we've trained some people up to HGV standard, and we're allowed to do that. We've got real good support from senior management to actually upskill our guys, because I understand that training someone and keeping them is the way forward. That is sustainability within the company.
Yeah, and as you say, staff retention really, really important, and that's to do with relationships and stuff. And so, working for someone like yourself, you know, what skills do you think you have that ensures that your drivers, when they work for you, they want to stay working for you?
Because I've been a driver,
yeah.
So I've had good bosses and bad bosses, like all drivers have. So I know what it takes. I know it is a big give and take. These guys do a very difficult job out on the road. Anyone who thinks driving an Arctic through central London is easy has clearly never done it.
Yeah.
So it's about just building a rapport and having respect with them, that they know if I'm talking from a level of experience, not just because I like the sound of my own voice.
Lovely, lovely, great. And you're going to show us a little bit about actually in the garage, in the warehouse, and we're going to have a look at that?
Yep, so part of the O licence regulations that your vehicles must be inspected by a competent mechanic every certain interval, so we're 6 weekly here. So we've got a contractor who's actually on the same site as us, and he does our maintenance, so we'll go and have a chat with him and I'll show you what they're doing.
I know nothing about engines, let's go and find out some stuff.
Okay, William.
Let's go. So Liam, talk us through what's going on here.
Right, so as I said earlier, with our O licence, the vehicle's got to be inspected regularly. Every 6 weeks it has pretty much an MOT. So it's why HGVs are kept to a higher standard than any other vehicle on the road. So every 6 weeks, depending on the mileage you do, some operators have to do it earlier than that, some operators can do it less than that. But with us, it's every 6 weeks. The vehicle's got to come into the workshop, it'll be lifted in the air, and it's got to be fully inspected by a competent mechanic.
And what's the capacity for lift on this machinery you've got here?
So at this workshop, he's got 8 lifts, and each one can lift 7.5 tonnes. So the combination he's working with at the moment is a 4 combination lift, so he can lift 30 tonne with that. But where he's got the 8 lifts, he can have 4 down each side, so you can lift complete Arctic with trailers.
And talk us through the safety elements that are key to when you're working on the vans and things. You know, from a layman's perspective, like obviously a basic thing would be tyres and things, but I'm sure there's more complicated things than that.
Yeah, so we're working on the standards with the lights and the tyres and things like that, but it's much more in depth. So you can see the mechanic's going around now, he has to check every bolt within the braking system, because that's vitally important when you're running on a heavy weight like these. You have to check all the air suspension, you have to check all the components basically, and even inside he does a full check of the seat belts, make sure all the operation facilities are working, how they're meant to work. So it's a lot involved. We also have a brake roller test. So we load the vehicles, we put on a set of brake rollers every 6 weeks just to check that the braking capacity is up to what it should be. And
I was going to talk to you about that, because when the vehicles are fully loaded, obviously the weight is going to be a lot more than it is when they're empty and things. So is there a specific spec that you have to go to when it's loaded and when it's unloaded, or?
Yeah, you have to have it loaded for the roller test, and it just checks a loaded vehicle.
Yeah.
These braking system runs on air brakes. Your standard car and van will run on hydraulics. So you have your little reservoir brake oil in it. These have a compressor which produces air and pumps into the system. So totally different to a standard car and van, of where usually in a car and a van the brake pads are kept away and then pushed towards. With these, if there's no air in that, it locks up.
Right.
So actually what you're doing is you're providing air to keep it away, and then when the air runs out, it locks in.
Yeah.
So what it means is, if there ever was a serious brake failure on a HGV, the compressor stopped working and there was a serious leak, it would actually stop the vehicle from moving.
It's just a fail-safe?
It's a fail-safe, yeah. So if it's on a hill or something like that and the brakes fail, you can't move.
I see we've got someone working under the vehicle at the moment. So do they work for you? Are they part of the Embassy team, or are they private contractors? How does that work?
He's a private contractor, so it's just his own garage, his own equipment, and he works on our vehicles as well as other vehicles.
And you know, without saying that he doesn't do his job properly, but obviously I'm assuming that you then everything has to be signed off for yourself?
Yeah, so I used to be a vehicle mechanic myself when I was in the army, so I know what I'm doing. I've also worked on vehicles before. And yeah, so it does work very closely with Embassy, and everything is fail-safe checked.
Lovely, thanks a lot. It was great to talk to Liam this morning about transport and all the things that are involved in the scaffolding industry and how transport works within the industry. We'd like to thank the Embassy site staff for having us here this morning, and we'll speak to you all soon.